In the heart of Montana's unforgiving wilderness, where temperatures plummet to depths that challenge the very will to survive, one woman's decision would defy everything she'd been taught about wildlife safety. What happened on that brutal January night would test not only her professional judgment, but also her understanding of the delicate balance between human boundaries and animal preservation. This is the extraordinary story of how a moment of compassion transformed into a battle against nature itself, and how the line between protocol and humanity sometimes blurs in the face of desperate circumstances. The ancient pines groaned under the weight of accumulating ice as Emily Richardson checked the temperature gauge outside her sanctuary's medical facility. -35 degrees Fahrenheit, and the mercury was still falling. In her 15 years of working with wildlife, first as an emergency veterinarian in Portland and now running her remote wildlife rehabilitation center in the Whitefish Mountain region, she had never witnessed such merciless cold. The approaching storm system wasn't merely another winter challenge. It was the kind that made even the most seasoned Montana residents retreat to lower elevations. But Emily couldn't leave. The wildlife sanctuary was her responsibility, her life's work, and her redemption from the burnout that had driven her from her prestigious urban veterinary practice 3 years ago. The facility, nestled deep in the wilderness, 2 hours from the nearest town of Pine Valley, stood as a testament to her commitment to giving injured wildlife a second chance. Tonight, that commitment would be tested in ways she never imagined. The sanctuary's main building was an architectural blend of modern medical facility and rustic Montana cabin, designed to treat injured wildlife while maintaining the delicate boundary between human care and wild instincts. Solar panels peeked through the growing blanket of snow, powering essential medical equipment and the security cameras that monitored the recovery enclosures. The backup generator hummed steadily, a reassuring reminder that even if the storm knocked out the main power, her patients would remain safe and warm. Emily moved through her evening routine with practiced efficiency, checking on each of her current residents. A young elk with a healing leg fracture, 2 golden eagles recovering from lead poisoning, a wolf pup being treated for mange. Each animal represented a small victory in her mission to preserve the wild creatures of these mountains. The medical wing was state-of-the-art, funded by years of savings and grants, equipped to handle almost any wildlife emergency. Almost. As she finished her rounds, the wind began to howl through the towering pines with increased ferocity. The weather alert on her satellite phone confirmed her worst fears. This storm would be historic. The National Weather Service was predicting temperatures to drop below -40, with wind chills approaching -60. These were the kind of conditions that could freeze exposed skin in seconds. Emily added extra insulation around the recovery enclosures and checked the heating systems one final time. Her patients were stable, protected, and warm. She should have felt satisfied, but something about this night set her nerves on edge. Perhaps it was the way the wind seemed to carry an almost mournful note, or how the darkness pressed against the windows with unusual weight. The sanctuary's security cameras displayed their usual nighttime views: snow-covered paths, the edge of the forest, and the small clearing where she sometimes observed wildlife from her office. Everything looked normal, yet the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. 15 years of working with wild animals had taught her to trust these instincts. She brewed a cup of strong coffee, knowing sleep would be elusive tonight. The storm was intensifying, and the massive windows of her living quarters offered a front-row seat to nature's fury. Snow fell in thick diagonal sheets, illuminated by the security lights that dotted the sanctuary's perimeter. The wind had grown so strong, it seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Emily's mind wandered to her former life in Portland. where winter meant rain and temperatures rarely dropped below freezing. Her colleagues had thought she was crazy to leave her successful practice to establish a wildlife sanctuary in one of the most remote parts of Montana. But after years of treating pampered pets and dealing with their sometimes more difficult owners, she had felt called to something more primal, more meaningful. The sanctuary had become more than just a rehabilitation center. It was a bridge between the wild and human worlds, a place where she could make a real difference in preserving the delicate balance of Montana's ecosystem. Every animal she treated and released back into the wild was a small victory against the encroachment of civilization on these last remaining wilderness areas. Her satellite phone buzzed, a message from the ranger station warning all residents in the area to stay indoors. The storm was developing into something unprecedented. Emily checked her supplies, emergency medical kits, food, water, and fuel for the generator. She was prepared for any eventuality, or so she thought. The first sign that this night would be different came just as she was updating her patient records. A movement on one of the security cameras caught her eye. A large, dark shape moving through the swirling snow. Emily leaned closer to the monitor, her heart rate quickening. She knew every type of wildlife in these mountains, could recognize their movements, their patterns. This was a bear, and it was moving wrong. Bears should have been deep in hibernation. And by now, Emily had treated enough of them to know their cycles intimately. For one to be active in these conditions meant something was terribly wrong. She switched between camera views, tracking the animal's progress. As it moved closer to the sanctuary, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just any bear, it was a mother with 3 cubs, and they were struggling. The mother bear's movements were labored, her massive body struggling against the brutal wind. The cubs huddled close to her, their small forms barely visible in the driving snow. Even through the grainy security footage, Emily could see they were in serious trouble. Ice was forming on their fur, and their movements were becoming increasingly uncoordinated. Classic signs of severe hypothermia. Emily's mind raced through possibilities. What could have driven them from their den in these conditions? Flooding, a cave-in, human disturbance. Whatever the cause, she knew with crushing certainty that without intervention, these bears would not survive the night. The cubs, especially, were far too small to withstand these temperatures. Every protocol, every wildlife management guideline, every lesson she'd ever learned screamed that you don't interfere with wild bears. You especially don't invite them into a building containing other injured animals. It would be professional suicide. If anything went wrong, she would lose everything, her license, the sanctuary, her life's work. But as she watched the family, struggling against the killing cold, another voice spoke up, the voice of the healer who had sworn to preserve and protect wildlife. The mother bear was now attempting to shield her cubs with her own body, but even her massive form couldn't protect them from the Arctic wind and plummeting temperatures. Emily's hands moved to the medical supply cabinet almost of their own accord. She began pulling out supplies, warming blankets, heating pads, injectable warming solutions. Her mind was already formulating a treatment plan, even as her rational side argued against what she was considering. She had treated hypothermic bears before, but never ones this large, never in these conditions, and never while they were fully conscious. The security camera showed the bear family had reached the edge of the sanctuary's main building. The mother bear was now moving with agonizing slowness, her strength clearly failing. 2 of the cubs had stopped walking entirely, being half-dragged through the snow by their mother's determined efforts. The 3rd cub lay limp in the snow, its mother desperately trying to nudge it back to its feet. Emily knew she had to make a decision now. In these temperatures, with their wet fur and depleted energy, the bears had minutes, not hours. Already, the smallest cub had stopped moving entirely. Emily could see the mother bear's efforts becoming weaker, her own body beginning to succumb to the cold. The scene unfolding on her security monitor was breaking every rule of wildlife conservation. Nature should be allowed to take its course, survival of the fittest, no interference in natural processes. But there was nothing natural about this situation. These bears should have been safely denning. Something had forced them out, and now human intervention might be their only chance at survival. Emily thought of all she had learned about these magnificent creatures over the years, their intelligence, their strong family bonds, their incredible will to survive. She thought of how many times she had treated injured bears, looked into their eyes and seen something more than just wild instinct. The mother bear collapsed beside her cubs, her massive body curling around them in one last attempt to provide warmth. Through the camera, Emily could see the steam of their breathing becoming fainter. It was now or never. What she was about to do would either be the most foolish or the most important decision of her career. She quickly moved to the sanctuary's large garage bay, normally used for receiving injured animals. Die Vorbereitung und Erzählung dieser Geschichte hat viel Zeit in Anspruch genommen. Wenn Ihnen die Geschichte gefällt, abonnieren Sie unseren Kanal. Das bedeutet uns sehr viel. Nun aber zurück zur Geschichte. The space was heated, secure, and separate from the other patients. It could serve as an emergency treatment area. Her hands shook as she prepared the space, laying out medical supplies and warming equipment. Every moment spent in preparation felt like a betrayal of the bears, fighting for their lives just outside. Emily took one last look at the security monitor. The bears were barely moving now. The mother's eyes were glazing over, her massive body shuddering with the last stages of hypothermia. The cubs lay motionless beside her. Time had run out. With trembling fingers, she reached for the garage bay door control. Everything she knew about wildlife safety, every rule she'd learned over 15 years of practice, told her to stop. But as she watched the family of bears slowly freezing to death, she realized that sometimes the rules had to bow to a higher calling. The oath she'd taken as a veterinarian, the promise she'd made to herself when she built this sanctuary, these weren't just words. They were a commitment to preserve life, even when that meant taking extraordinary risks. Emily took a deep breath and pressed the button. The garage door began to rise, bringing with it a blast of Arctic air and swirling snow. The mother bear's eyes flickered at the sound, a last spark of awareness in her fading consciousness. Emily grabbed her medical kit and stepped forward, knowing the next few moments would determine not just the bear's survival, but the very meaning of her life's work. If you found this story of survival and compassion touching, don't miss out on more extraordinary tales of wildlife rescue and human courage. Subscribe now to receive notifications about new stories that showcase the remarkable connections between humans and animals. Join our community of nature enthusiasts who understand that sometimes the most powerful moments happen when we choose to help, even in the face of impossible odds. Turn on notifications to never miss another incredible story of hope, survival, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and wildlife. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these remarkable true stories that remind us of our shared connection with the natural world. The morning had started like any other at the sanctuary, with Emily performing her established routines that kept both her and her wild patients alive through the harsh Montana winters. She had woken before dawn, when the world outside was still shrouded in darkness and the temperature gauge displayed a crisp -15. Cold, but nothing unusual for January in the Whitefish Mountains. The coffee maker's gentle burble accompanied her as she reviewed overnight footage from the security cameras, checking for any disturbances around the recovery enclosures. Dawn painted the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, transforming the sanctuary's grounds into a crystalline wonderland. Emily pulled on her heavy winter gear, each layer a necessary shield against the biting cold. Her breath formed, thick clouds in the air as she made her morning rounds, checking on each patient with the methodical precision that 15 years of veterinary practice had ingrained in her. The young elk with the healing fracture greeted her with a soft snort, its breath creating swirls of mist in the heated enclosure. Emily examined the leg with gentle hands, noting the improved range of motion. Another week, maybe two, and it would be ready for release. The golden eagles watched her with fierce yellow eyes as she checked their blood work results. The lead levels were finally dropping, a small victory in the constant battle against human impacts on wildlife. In the quarantine area, the wolf pup's mange was responding well to treatment. Its fur was beginning to grow back in patches, and its eyes held more spark than when local rangers had brought it in 2 weeks ago. Emily carefully documented each animal's progress in her medical records, the keyboard clicking, mixing with the constant hum of heating units and medical equipment. The sanctuary's main building was a testament to careful planning and hard-won experience. Every room served multiple purposes, each piece of equipment chosen for its reliability in extreme conditions. The medical bay could rival some urban veterinary hospitals, though its patients were considerably more dangerous. Emily had designed it herself, incorporating everything she'd learned from her years in emergency veterinary medicine. Throughout the morning, she monitored the weather reports with growing concern. The satellite feed showed a massive system moving in from Canada, bringing with it temperatures that hadn't been seen in this region for decades. Emily began her storm preparations early, meticulously checking each backup system. She tested the generator, confirming it would automatically engage if the solar power failed. The fuel tanks were full, enough to maintain essential functions for at least 2 weeks. In the medical storage room, Emily inventoried her supplies. The shelves were well stocked with medications, bandages, and emergency equipment. She had learned early on that in this remote location, running out of even basic supplies could mean the difference between life and death for an injured animal. Her fingers traced over the vials of emergency medications, mentally calculating dosages for various scenarios. The sanctuary's isolation meant she had to be prepared for anything. The wind began to pick up around noon, bringing with it the first signs of the approaching storm. Snow started falling in earnest, not the gentle flakes of a typical winter. Day, but sharp, crystalline particles that stung any exposed skin. Emily secured the outdoor recovery enclosures, adding extra insulation and checking the heating elements one final time. Each enclosure was a carefully designed balance of protection and natural environment, allowing injured animals to heal while maintaining their wild instincts. As afternoon approached, the temperature began its dramatic descent. Emily watched. The digital display dropped degree by degree, each number representing another step toward dangerous territory. The satellite phone buzzed constantly with updated weather alerts, each more severe than the last. The storm was intensifying faster than predicted, developing into what meteorologists were calling a once-in-a-century event. In her office, Emily reviewed her emergency protocols. Years of experience had taught her to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The sanctuary's medical bay could be converted into an emergency shelter if needed, though she had never imagined she might need to use it for active wildlife. Her emergency contact list was updated and posted by every phone. Rangers, wildlife services, other rehabilitators in the region, but she knew that in conditions like these, she would be on her own. The sanctuary's security system provided a constant feed of the surrounding area. Emily watched as small animals began seeking shelter, their normal patterns disrupted by the approaching storm. A family of foxes huddled under the equipment shed, and a group of elk moved slowly through the deepening snow, heading for the shelter of denser forest. The wildlife could sense what was coming. their instincts driving them to find whatever protection they could. By late afternoon, the storm had transformed the sanctuary's grounds into an alien landscape. The wind sculpted the snow into otherworldly shapes, and ice crystals formed on every surface, creating an ethereal but deadly beauty. The thermometer continued its relentless descent, each hour bringing new record lows. Emily's concerns grew as she calculated the wind chill factor. At these temperatures, exposure could be fatal in minutes, not hours. The satellite phone's reception began to deteriorate as the storm intensified. Emily made one final call to the ranger station, confirming that all patrols had been suspended until conditions improved. The message was clear. She would have no backup, no emergency support until the storm passed. The responsibility for her patient's survival rested solely on her shoulders. In the medical bay, Emily double-checked the emergency equipment. The warming units were ready, heating blankets stacked nearby. She had treated hypothermic wildlife before, but usually they were already unconscious when brought in. The thought of treating fully conscious, potentially aggressive animals made her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to stay focused on her preparations. As darkness fell, the storm reached new levels of intensity. The wind found every tiny gap in the building's construction, creating an eerie symphony of whistles and moans. The security cameras showed a world transformed into a swirling white. Void, visibility reduced to mere feet. The temperature display now read -35 and was still falling steadily. Emily moved through the sanctuary's rooms, checking and rechecking every system. The backup generator had already kicked in once, when a particularly strong gust interrupted the solar power supply. Each time she passed a window, the view outside had deteriorated further. The storm was now a solid wall of white, punctuated by the creaking and groaning of stressed trees. In the recovery ward, her patient sensed the growing tension. The elk pawed nervously at its bedding, and the eagles mantled their wings, responding to the dropping barometric pressure. Even the wolf pup, usually active and curious, had retreated to the back of its enclosure, instinctively seeking shelter. From the storm's fury, the satellite weather radar showed the worst was yet to come. The storm system had stalled over the region, setting up conditions for a prolonged period of extreme cold and heavy snow. Emily checked her supplies one final time: emergency rations, medical equipment, heating fuel. Everything was in place, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something unprecedented was approaching. As night fully descended, the sanctuary transformed into an island of warmth and light in a sea of swirling white chaos. Emily stationed herself in the monitoring room, where she could keep watch over both her patients and the surrounding area. The security cameras painted an increasingly dire picture of conditions outside. The snow was now falling so heavily that the powerful exterior lights could barely penetrate the gloom. The wind continued to strengthen, sending powerful gusts that made the building shudder. Trees creaked and swayed in the darkness, their branches heavy with accumulating ice. The temperature gauge now refused to give consistent readings, the extreme cold affecting even the digital display. Emily estimated it must be approaching -40, with wind chills far below that. In all her years of wildlife rehabilitation, Emily had developed an almost supernatural sense for when animals were in distress. It was more than just professional experience. It was an instinct honed by countless hours observing and treating wild creatures. As she watched the storm rage outside, that sixth sense began to tingle. Something was wrong, something beyond the obvious fury of the storm. The sanctuary's exterior cameras swept back and forth, their movements slowed by the accumulating ice. Emily found herself leaning closer to the monitors, straining to see through the curtain of snow. The normal nighttime movements of wildlife had ceased entirely. No deer, picking their way through the drifts, no foxes hunting for mice beneath the snow. The forest had gone completely still, as if holding its breath. Her attention was drawn to the northern camera, which covered the approach from the deeper wilderness. Something about the way the snow was moving caught her eye. Not the random swirling of wind-driven flakes, but a larger, more purposeful disturbance. Emily adjusted the camera's angle, trying to get a better view through the storm. The shapes emerged slowly from the white void, massive, dark forms moving with desperate determination through the deepening snow. Emily's heart rate quickened as she recognized what she was seeing. The mother bear's movements were labored, her powerful body struggling against the brutal wind. Behind her, 3 cubs fought to follow in her tracks, their small bodies barely visible in the driving snow. Emily's medical training kicked in automatically as she assessed their condition through the grainy footage. The bear's movements were becoming increasingly uncoordinated, a clear sign of advancing hypothermia. Ice caked their fur, adding weight and stealing precious body heat. The cubs especially were in grave danger. Their smaller bodies couldn't maintain heat in these extreme conditions. The sight of bears active in January sent Emily's mind racing through possibilities. Bears should be deep in hibernation, their bodies adapted to survive the winter through months of dormancy. For a mother to have her cubs out in these conditions, something catastrophic must have happened to their den. Perhaps an avalanche or flooding from the recent temperature fluctuations had forced them out. Whatever the cause, they were now in a desperate race against the cold. Emily found herself moving instinctively toward the medical bay, pulling out supplies she might need to treat severe hypothermia. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, even as her mind grappled with the impossibility of the situation. Everything she knew about wildlife rehabilitation told her not to interfere, to let nature take its course. But as she watched the bear family struggling against the killing cold, she knew she couldn't stand by and do nothing. The security cameras tracked the bear's slow progress toward the sanctuary. The mother bear's movements were becoming more erratic, her massive body swaying with exhaustion. The cubs were barely moving now, their small forms huddled close to their mother as she tried to shield them from the wind. Emily could see their breathing becoming more labored, their bodies beginning to shut down from the extreme cold. In the medical bay, Emily's preparations took on a frantic edge. She activated the emergency warming protocols, bringing the room's temperature up to help combat hypothermia. Warming blankets were plugged in, heating pads prepared. She mentally calculated doses of emergency medications, knowing she might have only one chance to get it right. The risks were enormous. Treating one large predator was dangerous enough, but a mother bear with cubs was among the most dangerous situations a wildlife rehabilitator could face. Through the windows, Emily could now see the bears directly. Illuminated by the sanctuary's exterior lights, the scene was heartbreaking. The mother bear, a creature of immense power and natural majesty, was reduced to stumbling through the snow, her strength nearly spent. The cubs, who should have been safely denning with their mother, were barely conscious, their small bodies reaching the limits of endurance. The wind howled with renewed fury, driving temperatures even lower. Emily watched as one of the cubs collapsed, unable to take another step. The mother bear's attempts to rouse it became increasingly desperate, her own movements hampered by exhaustion and cold. The other cubs huddled against their mother, their survival instincts drawing them to her failing warmth. Emily's hand hovered over the garage bay door control. Everything she had learned about wildlife rehabilitation, every safety protocol and professional guideline, told her to stay inside. But as she watched the bear family slowly freezing to death, she knew she had to make a choice between following rules and following her conscience. The mother bear's eyes met hers through the window, and in that moment, Emily saw something that transcended the usual barriers between human and wild animal. A desperate parent trying to save her children. The garage bay door mechanism hummed to life, breaking the relative silence of the sanctuary. As the door began to rise, Emily steeled herself for what was to come. She had spent her career helping wildlife, but never anything quite like this. The next few moments would either validate her life's work or become a cautionary tale about the dangers of interfering with nature. Either way, she knew she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try. The Montana wilderness transformed into an Arctic wasteland as the storm unleashed its full fury upon the sanctuary. Glass-like ice crystals drove horizontally through the air, creating an otherworldly screech as they pelted against the building's reinforced windows. The digital thermometer outside Emily's office window flickered erratically before finally stabilizing at -42 degrees, a temperature that turned exposed flesh to ice in mere seconds. From her position in the monitoring room, Emily watched the sanctuary's auxiliary power systems cycle on one by one as the main solar grid struggled against the mounting ice. The building's infrastructure groaned under the assault of sustained winds that topped 70 miles per hour. Each gust brought with it a new layer of crystalline snow that seemed to defy gravity, swirling upward before being driven into every crevice and corner. The medical bay's emergency lighting cast an eerie blue glow across the equipment she had prepared. Warming blankets hummed as they reached optimal temperature, and the industrial space heaters worked overtime to maintain a stable environment. The room, normally reserved for treating injured eagles and recovering wolves, now stood ready for patients of a different magnitude altogether. Through the observation windows, Emily could see her current residents responding to the unprecedented conditions. The young elk stamped nervously in its reinforced enclosure, its breath creating clouds of steam in the temperature-controlled space. The golden eagles had puffed their feathers to maximum capacity, an instinctive response to the dropping barometric pressure. Even the mange-ridden wolf pup, usually so full of energy, had retreated to the furthest corner of its enclosure. Ancient instincts warning it to conserve energy. The sanctuary's sophisticated ventilation system fought against the intense pressure differentials created by the storm. Air handlers cycled rapidly, attempting to maintain the delicate balance required. For the medical facilities, Emily had designed these systems herself, incorporating everything she'd learned from her years of wildlife rehabilitation. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for conditions like these. Meteorological readings from the sanctuaries. Weather station painted an increasingly dire picture. The storm system had stalled directly overhead, creating a meteorological phenomenon known as a cold air funnel. Ground temperatures continued to plummet as Arctic air was driven downward by the intense atmospheric pressure. The combination of extreme cold and violent winds created conditions that threatened every living thing exposed to them. Emily's satellite phone chirped with an urgent update from the National Weather Service. The storm had officially been classified as a once-in-a-century event, with conditions expected to worsen over the next 12 hours. All emergency services had been suspended until further notice. The message was clear: she was completely on her own. The sanctuary's exterior cameras continued their programmed sweep, their movements now sluggish from the accumulated ice. Through the swirling snow, Emily could make out the twisted shapes of small trees, bent almost horizontal by the relentless wind. The normal nighttime sounds of the wilderness had been replaced by an alien symphony of cracking branches and moaning wind. In the medical supply room, Emily double-checked her emergency preparations. The cabinets were well stocked with specialized medications designed for large predators, sedatives, antibiotics, and pain management drugs, carefully calculated for animals weighing hundreds of pounds. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar inventory, but her mind raced with calculations and contingencies she had never before considered. The sanctuary's perimeter alarm system suddenly flashed a warning, motion detected on the northern boundary. Emily quickly switched the main monitor to that sector's camera feed. Through the curtain of driving snow, dark shapes moved with desperate determination. The mother bear's massive form appeared first, her usual fluid grace replaced by movements that spoke of exhaustion and growing hypothermia. The three cubs followed in their mother's tracks, their small bodies fighting against wind that could easily lift them off their feet. Even through the grainy footage, Emily could see the ice forming on their fur, adding weight and stealing precious body heat. Their movements showed clear signs of advanced hypothermia, stumbling, uncoordinated steps that spoke of failing muscle control and cognitive function. The bear family's progress toward the sanctuary was agonizingly slow. Every few steps, one of the cubs would stumble and fall. The mother bear, despite her own obvious exhaustion, would stop and wait, sometimes physically helping her cubs back to their feet. The wind drove sheets of snow between them, momentarily obscuring them from view before revealing their continued struggle. Emily's medical training kicked in as she observed their deteriorating condition. Hypothermia in bears usually progressed more slowly than in other mammals. Their bodies evolved to handle extreme cold, but these conditions went beyond anything their natural adaptations could handle. The cubs, with their smaller body mass and underdeveloped fat reserves, were particularly vulnerable. The main equipment room hummed with activity as Emily activated additional heating systems. The garage bay, designed for receiving injured wildlife, quickly warmed to a temperature that would help combat severe hypothermia. She gathered specialized equipment, warming blankets designed for large animals, heated intravenous fluids, and emergency revival medications. Through the reinforced windows, Emily could now see the bears directly. The mother's fur was caked with ice, her massive form moving with the jerky, uncoordinated movements characteristic of severe hypothermia. Steam rose from her body, where her remaining heat met the frigid air, quickly crystallizing into a fine frost. The cubs huddled close to her, their small forms barely visible in the driving snow. The security cameras captured the moment when the first cub collapsed completely. Its small body, overwhelmed by the cold, simply crumpled into the deep snow. The mother bear's response was immediate, but weakening. She attempted to lift the cub with her snout, her movements becoming increasingly frantic as the cub failed to respond. The other two cubs pressed closer to their mother, their own strength clearly failing. Emily's hands shook as she prepared emergency medications. Her mind raced through treatment protocols, adapting them for this unprecedented situation. The standard procedures for treating hypothermic wildlife assumed the animals would be unconscious upon arrival. Treating conscious, potentially aggressive bears would be something else entirely. The wind grew stronger still, driving the wind chill to unimaginable depths. Through the observation windows, Emily watched as the second cub stumbled and fell. The mother bear's attempts to help her cubs became weaker, her own body beginning to succumb to the extreme cold. The third cub, slightly larger than its siblings, remained on its feet but swayed dangerously with each gust of wind. Ice crystals formed intricate patterns on the sanctuary's windows, creating a delicate lattice that belied the lethal conditions. Outside, the mother bear had positioned herself between her cubs and the wind, using her massive body as a final shield against the cold. Steam no longer rose from her fur, a dangerous sign that her core temperature had dropped too low. Bears had reached the outer edge of the sanctuary's main building. The mother's movements were now barely coordinated, her massive head dropping lower with each step. The cubs lay huddled together in the snow, their small bodies shivering violently, a reflex that would soon give way to the dangerous stillness of severe hypothermia. Emily's medical training warred with every safety protocol she had ever learned. Bears were among the most dangerous animals to treat, their strength and unpredictability legendary among wildlife rehabilitators. A mother bear with cubs represented the highest level of risk, maternal instincts making them even more dangerous than solitary adults. The garage bay door mechanism hummed to life, breaking the relative silence of the medical wing. As the door began to rise, Emily felt the full force of the storm surge into the building. The wind carried ice crystals that stung her exposed skin, and the temperature in the bay dropped rapidly despite the heating systems working at full capacity. Through the opening door, Emily could see the bear family clearly for the first time. The mother bear's fur, normally a rich brown, was encased in ice that crackled with her every movement. Her eyes, usually bright with intelligence and wild strength, were glazing over as hypothermia tightened its grip. The cubs lay motionless. In the snow, their small bodies nearly covered by the constantly accumulating drifts. The sanctuary's exterior lights cast harsh shadows across the scene, creating an almost surreal tableau of wilderness tragedy. The mother bear's breath came in shallow pants, visible as brief clouds of steam that crystallized instantly in the Arctic air. Her massive head turned toward Emily, and in that moment, their eyes met across the divide between wild and human worlds. Time seemed to slow as Emily watched the mother bear's last reserves of strength begin to fail. The magnificent creature, capable of taking down elk and defending territory against rival predators, swayed on her feet as the cold penetrated to her core. Her cubs had stopped shivering, a sign that their bodies were entering the final stages of hypothermia. The wind howled through the open bay door, bringing with it a fresh assault of snow and ice. Equipment rattled on nearby shelves, and loose papers swirled through the air. The mother bear remained focused on Emily, her gaze holding something that transcended the usual wariness between predator and human. In those dark eyes, Emily saw a desperation that matched her own racing thoughts. Medical equipment hummed in the background as Emily took her first step forward. The warming blankets were ready, heating pads prepared to combat the devastating cold. Emergency medications were calculated and drawn up, though administering them to conscious bears would be a challenge, unlike any she had faced before. The mother bear made a sound, not the threatening growl Emily had expected, but a low, desperate moan that cut through the howling wind and straight to her core. It was the sound of a mother watching her children die, a sound that knew no species barrier. The cubs had stopped moving entirely, their small forms now just dark shapes in the deepening snow. Emily's breath fogged in the rapidly cooling air of the garage bay. The heating systems struggled against the Arctic wind that poured through the open door. Her hands, steady through countless wildlife emergencies, trembled slightly as she reached for the first warming blanket. Everything in her professional training told her to stay back, to let nature take its course. But as she watched the bear family succumbing to the cold, Emily knew she had crossed a point of no return. The mother bear's eyes never left her as she took another step forward. In that moment, Emily understood that she wasn't just fighting against the cold, she was fighting for something more fundamental, a recognition of the bonds that connected all living things in their struggle for survival. The storm raged on, indifferent to the drama unfolding in its midst. Snow continued to fall in thick curtains, and the wind drove ice crystals through the air with lethal force. But in the sanctuary's garage bay, illuminated by emergency lights and surrounded by life-saving equipment, Emily Richardson prepared to challenge nature itself in a desperate attempt to save a family of bears from the killing cold. The sanctuary's sophisticated monitoring system registered the bear's vital signs from a distance, sending data streaming across Emily's medical tablets. Core temperatures were dropping rapidly, the cubs showing readings that shouldn't have been compatible with life. The mother bear's massive body, typically maintained at a steady 98 degrees, even in winter conditions, now registered a dangerous 91 and falling. Without immediate intervention, the next few minutes would determine survival or death. Emily moved with practiced precision through the medical bay, gathering specialized equipment designed for extreme wildlife emergencies. The warming units hummed at maximum capacity, fighting against the Arctic air that poured through the open garage door. Her hands, steady through countless procedures, now moved with an urgency born of desperate circumstances. The medical monitors cast an eerie blue glow across the scene, their displays showing the bear's deteriorating condition in stark digital readouts. Emily had treated hypothermic wildlife before, but never anything of this magnitude. The mother bear's size alone presented unprecedented challenges. Moving an unconscious animal of that weight would require resources she didn't have. Through the swirling snow, Emily observed subtle signs that her professional experience recognized as critical. The cub's breathing had become shallow and irregular, their small bodies no longer shivering, a dangerous indication that their natural thermal regulation had failed completely. The mother bear's movements showed increasing disorientation, her massive head weaving as her consciousness began to fade. The sanctuary's emergency protocols had never accounted for a situation like this. Emily's mind raced through her options, drawing on 15 years of veterinary experience. Standard treatment for severe hypothermia required careful rewarming to prevent shock, but these bears were far past the point where conventional approaches would suffice. They needed immediate, aggressive intervention. Thermal imaging cameras revealed the full extent of the crisis. The cub's body heat signatures were barely visible, their core temperatures so low they appeared as ghost-like shapes against the snow. The mother bear's thermal signature showed dangerous cold penetration into her vital organs, a condition that would soon become irreversible. Emily's medical training kicked in automatically as she assessed the situation. The youngest cub, smaller than its siblings, had already stopped breathing entirely. The middle cub's heartbeat was dangerously arrhythmic, visible through the thermal imaging as a weakening flutter. The largest cub maintained shallow breathing, but its condition deteriorated with each passing second. The mother bear's eyes, usually bright with wild intelligence, had taken on a glazed appearance characteristic of severe hypothermia. Her massive body swayed precariously, the last of her strength focused on remaining upright. Steam no longer rose from her fur, a critical sign that her core temperature had dropped below the point where her body could generate sufficient heat. Emergency medical equipment surrounded Emily as she prepared for intervention. Specialized warming blankets designed for large wildlife lay ready to deploy. Intravenous fluids, heated to precise temperatures, waited in their warming units. Emergency medications, calculated for massive body weights, were prepared in their syringes. The wind drove snow horizontally through the open bay door, coating everything in a fine layer of ice crystals. Equipment readouts flickered as the extreme cold affected their electronic displays. The sanctuary's heating system strained against the Arctic air, creating a battle zone between warmth and killing cold. Emily's vital signs monitors showed the critical nature of the situation in stark digital clarity. The cubs' heart rates had dropped to dangerous levels, their small bodies beginning to shut down non-essential functions in a last-ditch effort to survive. The mother bear's massive cardiovascular system showed signs of severe stress, her powerful heart struggling to maintain circulation. The sanctuary's medical bay, designed to handle everything from injured eagles to wounded wolves, now faced its greatest challenge. Emily had equipped the facility with state-of-the-art technology, but treating 4 critically hypothermic bears simultaneously would push everything to its limits. The warming units, capable of treating animals weighing hundreds of pounds, would be barely adequate for the mother bear alone. Through the thermal imaging display, Emily watched as the bear's heat signatures continued to fade. The mother bear's natural insulation, evolved over millennia to handle extreme cold, had been overwhelmed by the unprecedented conditions. Her cubs, lacking fully developed fat reserves and insulation, were losing their battle against the cold even faster. The sanctuary's emergency generators hummed at maximum capacity as Emily activated additional heating systems. The medical bay's temperature rose steadily, creating a warm zone that stood in stark contrast to the Arctic conditions outside. Every piece of equipment was pushed to its limits, drawing power that made the electrical systems strain. Emily's professional experience told her that standard hypothermia protocols wouldn't be sufficient. These bears needed immediate aggressive intervention to have any chance of survival. The cubs, especially, were beyond the point where gradual rewarming would be effective. Their small bodies, already shutting down, required immediate core temperature. Elevation. The mother bear's condition deteriorated visibly as Emily watched. The magnificent creature's movements became increasingly uncoordinated, her massive body struggling to remain upright. Her attempts to check on her cubs grew weaker, maternal instinct fighting against failing strength. The look in her eyes changed from desperation to resignation as her consciousness began to fade. Emergency medical alarms began to sound as the cub's vital signs reached critical levels. The youngest cub's heart had nearly stopped. Its small body temperature so low it barely registered on the monitors. The middle cub's breathing had become agonal, a sign of imminent respiratory failure. Even the largest cub, initially the strongest, showed dangerous cardiac arrhythmias. Emily's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she prepared for immediate intervention. The warming blankets hummed at maximum output, their specialized heating elements designed to prevent thermal shock in large animals. Intravenous fluids, heated to precisely calculated temperatures, stood ready for administration. Emergency medications, carefully measured for massive body weights, waited in their syringes. The mother bear's massive form swayed dangerously as her strength finally began to fail completely. Her fur, normally a rich brown, had become encased in ice that crackled with each labored movement. Her breathing grew increasingly shallow, visible as brief clouds of steam that crystallized instantly in the Arctic air. Her eyes, focused on Emily with surprising clarity, held a look that transcended the usual barriers between wild and human. Emily's medical monitors painted an increasingly dire picture of the bear's condition. Core temperatures had dropped to levels that should have been fatal, yet somehow these magnificent creatures clung to life through sheer determination. The cubs' vital signs flickered on the verge of failure, their small bodies pushed far beyond their natural limits. The sanctuary's sophisticated monitoring system continued to stream data across Emily's medical tablets, each reading more critical than the last. The mother bear's massive cardiovascular system showed signs of imminent collapse, her powerful heart struggling against the effects of severe hypothermia. The cubs' readings barely registered, their life signs so faint they challenged the equipment's ability to detect them. Through the thermal imaging cameras, Emily watched as the bear's heat signatures grew fainter with each passing moment. The mother bear's natural insulation, typically capable of maintaining core temperature even in extreme conditions, had been overwhelmed by the unprecedented cold. Her cubs, lacking fully developed thermal regulation, were fading even faster. Emily's professional experience told her the time had run out for conventional approaches. These bears needed immediate aggressive intervention to have any chance of survival. The cubs especially were beyond the point where gradual rewarming would be effective. Their small bodies, already shutting down, required immediate core temperature. Elevation. The mother bear's eyes never left Emily as she made her final preparations. In that steady gaze, Emily saw something that challenged everything she knew about wildlife behavior. There was no aggression, no wild fury, only a desperate trust that transcended natural instincts. It was the look of a mother who knew her. Children's lives hung in the balance. Emergency medical equipment surrounded Emily as she prepared for intervention. Specialized warming blankets designed for large wildlife lay ready to deploy. Intravenous fluids, heated to precise temperatures, waited in their warming units. Emergency medications, calculated for massive body weights, were prepared in their syringes. The wind drove snow horizontally through the open bay door, coating everything in a fine layer of ice crystals. Equipment readouts flickered as the extreme cold affected their electronic displays. The sanctuary's heating system strained against the Arctic air, creating a battle zone between warmth and killing cold. Emily's vital signs monitors showed the critical nature of the situation in stark digital clarity. The cubs' heart rates had dropped to dangerous levels, their small bodies beginning to shut down non-essential functions in a last-ditch effort to survive. The mother bear's massive cardiovascular system showed signs of severe stress, her powerful heart struggling to maintain circulation. The advanced medical equipment in the sanctuary's treatment bay cast an ethereal glow across the snow-covered floor as Emily conducted her rapid assessment of the situation. Her thermal imaging equipment revealed the devastating extent of the bear's condition. Their core temperatures had plummeted far below sustainable levels. The youngest cub's thermal signature was barely detectable, its tiny body almost indistinguishable from the surrounding snow. Emily's specialized wildlife monitoring system provided real-time data on the bear's vital signs. The mother's heart rate had dropped to dangerous levels, her massive cardiovascular system struggling against the effects of severe hypothermia. The electrical activity in her heart showed concerning irregularities, a sign that cardiac arrest could be imminent without immediate intervention. The treatment bay's warming units hummed at maximum capacity, fighting against the Arctic air that continued to pour through the open door. Emily had designed this facility to handle the most extreme wildlife emergencies, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for treating 4 critically hypothermic bears simultaneously. The technical challenges alone were daunting. Moving and treating animals of this size required careful planning and precise execution. Her medical tablet displayed a cascade of warning indicators as the bear's conditions continued to deteriorate. The middle cub's respiratory rate had dropped to 4 breaths per minute, less than a quarter of normal. The largest cub showed dangerous cardiac arrhythmias, its heart struggling to maintain proper rhythm in the face of severe cold stress. The mother bear's blood oxygen levels were critically low, her body beginning to prioritize vital organs in a last-ditch effort to survive. The sanctuary's emergency protocols flashed across Emily's mind as she assessed her treatment options. Standard hypothermia procedures called for gradual rewarming to prevent shock. But these bears were far beyond that point. Their condition required immediate aggressive intervention, a risky approach that could send them into cardiac arrest, if not perfectly executed. Through the advanced monitoring equipment, Emily observed subtle signs that her years of veterinary experience recognized as critical. The cubs' blood circulation had become centralized, their bodies shutting down peripheral blood flow to protect vital organs. The mother bear's massive muscles showed signs of severe cramping, a dangerous complication of advanced hypothermia that could lead to permanent damage. The treatment bay's sophisticated heating system struggled to maintain proper temperature as the Arctic wind continued its assault. Emily's equipment readings showed the ambient temperature hovering just above freezing despite the heating units operating at full capacity. The bears needed an environment at least 40 degrees warmer to have any chance at survival. Emily's medical training kicked into high gear as she formulated her treatment plan. The cubs would need immediate core rewarming. Their small bodies lacked the reserves to generate sufficient heat on their own. The mother bear's massive size presented different challenges. Rewarming too quickly could send her into shock, while moving too slowly would allow vital organs to continue failing. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical storage unit provided access to the specialized medications Emily would need. Cardiac stabilizers designed for massive predators, thermoregulatory enhancers calibrated for bears' unique metabolism, and emergency stimulants that could help restart failing organs. Each medication required precise calculation based on body, weight, and condition. Through the thermal imaging display, Emily watched the bear's heat signatures continue to fade. The mother bear's natural insulation, typically sufficient to handle extreme cold, had been overwhelmed by the unprecedented conditions. Her cubs, lacking fully developed fat reserves and insulation, were losing their battle against the cold even faster. The treatment bay's emergency equipment surrounded Emily as she prepared for intervention. Specialized warming blankets designed to handle animals weighing hundreds of pounds lay ready for deployment. Intravenous fluid bags, heated to carefully calculated temperatures, waited in their warming units. Emergency medications, prepared in precise dosages for massive body weights, stood ready in their syringes. Emily's vital signs monitors painted an increasingly dire picture of the bear's condition. The cubs' core temperatures had dropped below 80 degrees Fahrenheit, a level that should have been fatal. Yet somehow their hearts continued to beat, though each contraction grew weaker. The mother bear's massive cardiovascular system showed signs of imminent failure, her powerful heart struggling to maintain even basic circulation. The sanctuary's advanced monitoring system streamed continuous data about the bear's deteriorating condition. Blood pressure readings showed dangerous hypertension, their circulatory systems beginning to collapse. Oxygen saturation levels dropped steadily as their bodies struggled to maintain basic functions. Cardiac monitors displayed increasingly concerning arrhythmias. Through the sophisticated medical equipment, Emily observed the bear's neurological status. The cubs showed minimal response to stimuli, their bodies conserving energy by shutting down non-essential functions. The mother bear's consciousness was fading, though her eyes remained fixed on Emily with surprising clarity. Even in her severely compromised state, maternal instinct kept her focused on protecting her cubs. The treatment bay's emergency generators hummed at maximum capacity as Emily activated additional warming systems. The medical area's temperature slowly rose, creating a pocket of warmth that stood in stark contrast to the Arctic conditions outside. Every piece of equipment strained under the demands of the situation, drawing power that made the electrical systems groan. Emily's professional experience told her that conventional treatment protocols wouldn't be sufficient. These bears needed immediate, aggressive intervention to have any chance of survival. The cubs, especially, required rapid core rewarming. Their small bodies had no more reserves to draw upon. The mother bear's massive size meant any intervention would need to be carefully balanced to prevent shock. The sanctuary's medical monitors displayed the critical nature of the situation in stark digital readouts. The cubs' heart rates had dropped to dangerous levels, their small bodies beginning to shut down non-essential functions in a last-ditch effort to survive. The mother bear's massive cardiovascular system showed signs of severe stress, her powerful heart struggling to maintain circulation. Through the treatment bay's observation windows, Emily could see her other patients responding to the crisis. The young elk stamped nervously in its enclosure, sensing the presence of predators. The golden eagles maintained an unusual silence, their natural instincts suppressed by the extreme conditions. Even the wolf pup remained quiet, ancient survival instincts keeping it still and watchful. Emily's medical training highlighted the complexity of the situation. Treating hypothermia in bears presented unique challenges due to their specialized biology. Their natural adaptation to cold conditions meant their bodies would resist rapid rewarming, yet their current state demanded immediate intervention. The cubs' immature systems added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical inventory provided the specialized medications Emily would need. Vasodilators to improve circulation without overwhelming the heart. Electrolyte solutions specially formulated for large predators. Emergency cardiac medications calibrated for massive body weights. Each treatment option carried its own risks and potential complications. Through the sophisticated monitoring equipment, Emily observed the bears' metabolic status. Their blood chemistry showed dangerous imbalances, elevated potassium levels that could trigger cardiac arrest, acidosis from prolonged oxygen deprivation, depleted glucose reserves leaving no energy for recovery. Each abnormality required careful correction to prevent further complications. The treatment bay's emergency protocols had never been tested under such extreme conditions. Emily had designed the facility to handle serious wildlife injuries and illnesses, but treating 4 critically hypothermic bears simultaneously pushed every system to its limits. The warming units, capable of treating animals weighing hundreds of pounds, would be barely adequate for the mother bear alone. Emily's professional expertise told her that time was running out. The cubs' vital signs weakened with each passing moment, their small bodies losing the fight against the cold. The mother bear's condition deteriorated visibly, her massive form swaying as consciousness began to fade. Without immediate intervention, the next few minutes would determine survival or death. The sanctuary's advanced medical equipment continued to stream vital data across Emily's tablets. Each reading confirmed the critical nature of the situation: dangerous arrhythmias, failing circulation, deteriorating organ function. The sophisticated monitoring systems painted a picture of 4 lives balanced on the edge of survival, their fate resting in Emily's hands. Through the thermal imaging cameras, Emily watched as the bear's heat signatures grew fainter. The mother bear's natural insulation, evolved over millennia to handle extreme cold, had been overwhelmed by the unprecedented conditions. Her cubs, lacking fully developed thermal regulation, were fading even faster. The images provided stark confirmation that conventional treatment approaches would not be sufficient. The treatment bay's emergency equipment hummed with potential energy, ready to deploy at Emily's command. Warming blankets designed for massive body weights, intravenous fluids heated to precise temperatures, emergency medications calculated for critical situations. Each element represented a crucial part of the complex intervention required to save these magnificent creatures. Emily's vital signs monitors showed the increasingly critical situation in stark digital clarity. The cubs' heart rates had dropped to dangerously low levels, their small bodies beginning to shut down non-essential functions in a last-ditch effort to survive. The mother bear's massive cardiovascular system showed signs of severe stress, her powerful heart struggling to maintain basic circulation. Delicate ice crystals formed intricate patterns on the treatment bay's reinforced windows as Emily initiated emergency protocols. Her specialized equipment displayed alarming new developments. The mother bear's cardiac rhythm showed dangerous irregularities, while the cub's vital signs weakened with each passing moment. The youngest cub's breathing had become shallow and erratic, its tiny body trembling despite the severe hypothermia. The sanctuary's advanced life support systems engaged automatically as critical thresholds were breached. Warming units designed for large predators reached therapeutic temperatures, their gentle hum a counterpoint to the howling wind outside. Emily's tablet streamed real-time data about blood oxygen levels, core temperatures, and cardiac function, each reading more concerning than the last. Through the sophisticated monitoring equipment, Emily detected subtle changes in the bear's condition that would have been invisible to the naked eye. The mother bear's massive heart struggled to maintain circulation, its powerful muscles compromised by the extreme cold. The cub's blood chemistry showed dangerous imbalances, their small bodies unable to regulate basic functions. Emily's medical training highlighted the complexity of their predicament. Bears possessed unique physiological adaptations for cold weather survival, but these same adaptations could complicate treatment. Rapid rewarming risked sending them into shock, while moving too slowly meant certain death. The cub's immature systems added another layer of risk to an already precarious situation. The treatment bay's emergency generators surged as Emily activated additional heating elements. Specialized infrared panels, normally reserved for post-surgical recovery, cast a warm glow across the medical area. The temperature gradient between the heated space and the Arctic conditions outside created visible currents in the air, snow crystals swirling in complex patterns. Emily's vital signs monitors revealed the critical nature of their circumstances. The mother bear's core temperature had dropped to levels that should have been fatal, yet somehow her heart continued beating. The cubs showed signs of severe cardiovascular stress, their small bodies struggling to maintain basic functions. Each moment that passed increased the risk of permanent damage. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical storage provided access to specialized medications rarely used in wildlife rehabilitation, vasodilators to improve circulation without overwhelming stressed hearts. Thermoregulatory enhancers designed specifically for large predators, emergency cardiac medications calibrated for massive body weights. Each treatment option carried its own risks and potential complications. Through the sophisticated imaging equipment, Emily observed the bear's deteriorating condition in stark detail. The mother bear's natural insulation, typically sufficient for extreme conditions, had been compromised by prolonged exposure. Her cubs, lacking fully developed fat reserves, showed dangerous signs of central nervous system depression. Their thermal signatures grew fainter with each passing minute. The treatment bay's emergency protocols activated in sequence as Emily prepared for intervention. Warming blankets designed for creatures weighing hundreds of pounds reached optimal temperatures. Intravenous fluids, heated with precise control, waited in specialized delivery systems. Emergency medications, calculated for critical situations, stood ready in their syringes. Emily's professional expertise highlighted the unprecedented nature of their situation. Standard hypothermia protocols assumed treating a single animal under controlled conditions. Managing 4 critically ill bears simultaneously, each requiring immediate intervention, pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The mother bear's massive size alone presented unique challenges for treatment and monitoring. The sanctuary's advanced monitoring systems continued streaming vital data across Emily's medical displays. Cardiac rhythms showed increasing irregularity. Blood pressure readings dropped steadily, and oxygen saturation levels plummeted. Each indicator confirmed the urgent need for intervention, while simultaneously highlighting the risks of aggressive treatment. Through the treatment bay's observation windows, Emily noted the bear's neurological status. The cubs displayed minimal response to stimuli, their bodies conserving energy by shutting down non-essential functions. The mother bear's consciousness wavered, though maternal instinct kept her focused on her offspring despite her own critical condition. Emily's medical training emphasized the delicate balance required for successful intervention. Too much warmth too quickly could trigger fatal cardiac arrhythmias. Insufficient warming meant continued deterioration of vital organs. The cubs small size made them especially vulnerable to temperature changes, while their mother's massive bulk complicated rewarming efforts. The sanctuary's emergency equipment hummed with potential energy as Emily finalized her treatment plan. Specialized monitoring leads designed for large predators waited to be attached. Warming devices calibrated for critical care stood ready for deployment. Each piece of equipment represented a crucial element in the complex intervention required to save these magnificent creatures. Through the sophisticated medical technology, Emily observed new complications developing. The mother bear's blood chemistry showed dangerous imbalances, elevated potassium levels that threatened cardiac function, acidosis from prolonged oxygen deprivation, depleted glucose reserves, leaving no energy for recovery. Each abnormality required careful correction to prevent cascade failure. The treatment bay's environmental controls struggled against the Arctic conditions still pouring through the open door. Emily had designed these systems for extreme situations, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this level of challenge. The temperature differential between the heated space and the outside air created visible currents that stirred the medical supplies. Emily's professional experience highlighted the critical nature of timing in their situation. The cubs needed immediate intervention to have any chance of survival. Their small bodies already pushed far beyond normal limits. The mother bear's condition required equally urgent care, though her massive size meant any treatment carried additional risks. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical inventory provided specialized medications rarely used in wildlife rehabilitation. Cardiac stabilizers designed for massive predators, thermoregulatory enhancers calibrated for bears' unique metabolism, emergency stimulants that could help restart failing organs. Each medication required precise calculation based on weight and condition. Through the advanced monitoring equipment, Emily tracked the bear's deteriorating vital signs. Blood pressure readings showed dangerous hypotension, their circulatory systems beginning to collapse. Oxygen saturation levels dropped steadily as their bodies struggled to maintain basic functions. Cardiac monitors displayed increasingly concerning arrhythmias. The treatment bay's emergency protocols had never been tested under such extreme conditions. Emily had equipped the facility to handle serious wildlife injuries and illnesses, but treating 4 critically hypothermic bears simultaneously pushed every system to its limits. The warming units, capable of treating animals weighing hundreds of pounds, would be barely adequate for the mother bear alone. Emily's medical expertise told her that conventional treatment approaches would not be sufficient. These bears needed immediate, aggressive intervention to have any chance of survival. The cubs, especially, required rapid core rewarming. Their small bodies had no more reserves to draw upon. The mother bear's massive size meant any intervention would need to be carefully balanced to prevent shock. The sanctuary's advanced monitoring systems painted an increasingly dire picture of the bear's condition. Cardiac rhythms showed dangerous irregularities, blood pressure readings continued to fall, and oxygen saturation levels plummeted. Each indicator confirmed the urgent need for intervention, while simultaneously highlighting the risks of aggressive treatment. Through the sophisticated medical equipment, Emily observed the bear's neurological status. The cubs displayed minimal response to stimuli, their bodies conserving energy by shutting down non-essential functions. The mother bear's consciousness wavered, though maternal instinct kept her focused on her offspring, despite her own critical condition. The treatment bay's emergency generators strained under the increasing power demands as Emily activated additional support systems. Specialized warming units designed for post-surgical recovery cast a warm glow across the medical area. The temperature gradient between the heated space and the Arctic conditions outside created visible currents in the air. Time slowed to a crystalline stillness as Emily Richardson faced the most challenging ethical decision of her career. Her advanced medical displays painted a stark picture of imminent mortality. 4 magnificent creatures balanced on the knife edge, between survival and death. Years of professional training warred with raw compassion as she calculated the risks of intervention against the certainty of loss. The sanctuary's emergency protocols scrolled through her tablet, each line highlighting the unprecedented nature of the situation. Wildlife rehabilitation guidelines emphasized maintaining distance, avoiding interference with natural processes, and never intervening with conscious predators. Yet these bears' presence here defied natural order. Their desperate struggle against killing cold represented a tragedy born of human impact on their environment. Through the sophisticated medical equipment, Emily observed new complications developing in the bear's condition. The mother's cardiac rhythm displayed concerning variations that suggested imminent failure. The cub's vital signs weakened with each passing moment, their small bodies surrendering to the overwhelming cold. Standard medical procedures offered no guidance for this extraordinary circumstance. The treatment bay's environmental controls created a sharp demarcation between survival and death. Within the heated space, life-saving equipment waited to deploy. Beyond the open door, Arctic wind carried ice crystals that could freeze exposed flesh in seconds. Emily's professional judgment told her the bears would never survive the night without intervention, yet helping them meant risking everything she'd built. Memory fragments from her veterinary training flashed through Emily's mind as she assessed their deteriorating condition. Lectures on wildlife management emphasized the importance of maintaining natural selection. Seminars on predator behavior warned against interference with maternal bears. Yet nothing in her education had prepared her for this moment, when professional protocol collided with moral imperative. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical inventory represented both solution and risk. Medications capable of saving the bears could also trigger fatal complications if administered incorrectly. Thermoregulatory drugs designed for large predators might help the mother bear, but prove devastating to her cubs. Each potential treatment carried the weight of irreversible consequence. Emily's medical training highlighted the complexity of their survival chances. The cubs' small bodies, already pushed beyond natural limits, might not withstand aggressive intervention. The mother bear's massive size meant any treatment risked sending her into shock. Success required perfect execution of procedures never before attempted under these conditions. The treatment bay's emergency equipment hummed with potential energy, each piece representing years of wildlife rehabilitation experience. Warming units capable of treating massive predators stood ready to deploy. Monitoring systems designed for critical care waited to track vital signs. Yet using this technology meant crossing an ethical line that could never be uncrossed. Through sophisticated imaging systems, Emily tracked subtle changes in the bear's condition that deepened her internal conflict. The mother bear's natural insulation, typically sufficient for extreme weather, had been overwhelmed by unprecedented cold. Her cubs, lacking fully developed survival adaptations, showed increasing signs of systemic failure. Their thermal signatures grew fainter with each passing minute. The sanctuary's advanced monitoring equipment streamed data that forced impossible choices. Blood chemistry readings suggested organ failure would begin within minutes. Cardiac monitors showed dangerous arrhythmias that preceded final collapse. Every indicator demanded immediate action, yet professional guidelines insisted on non-intervention. Emily's years of experience treating wildlife illuminated the razor's edge she walked. Too much intervention could trigger fatal shock or aggressive, defensive responses. Too little meant certain death for all 4 bears. The margin for error was 0, and the consequences of failure extended beyond just these animals to the sanctuary's future ability to help others. The treatment bay's emergency protocols had never contemplated a situation of this magnitude. Emily had designed the facility to handle serious injuries and illnesses, but always under controlled conditions with sedated animals. Treating 4 conscious, critically ill bears simultaneously pushed beyond all established procedures. Through the sophisticated medical displays, Emily observed the bears' neurological status deteriorating. The cubs displayed minimal response to stimuli, their bodies shutting down non-essential functions to preserve vital organs. The mother bear's consciousness wavered, though maternal instinct kept her focused on her offspring despite her own critical condition. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical storage contained medications that could mean the difference between life and death. Vasodilators to improve circulation without overwhelming stressed hearts. Thermoregulatory enhancers designed specifically for large predators, emergency cardiac medications calibrated for massive body weights. Each treatment option carried its own risks and ethical implications. Emily's professional expertise highlighted the unprecedented aspects of their situation. Standard hypothermia protocols assumed treating single animals under controlled conditions. Managing 4 critically ill bears simultaneously, each requiring immediate intervention, challenged every aspect of wildlife rehabilitation practice. The mother bear's massive size alone presented unique risks for treatment and monitoring. The treatment bay's environmental controls struggled against Arctic conditions still pouring through the open door. Emily had designed these systems for extreme situations, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this level of challenge. The temperature differential between the heated space and the outside air created visible currents that stirred the medical supplies. Through advanced monitoring systems, Emily tracked the bears' deteriorating vital signs. Blood pressure readings showed dangerous hypertension, their circulatory systems beginning to collapse. Oxygen saturation levels dropped steadily as their bodies struggled to maintain basic functions. Cardiac monitors displayed increasingly concerning arrhythmias. The sanctuary's emergency equipment represented both hope and hazard. Specialized monitoring leads designed for large predators waited to be attached, though doing so meant approaching dangerous animals. Warming devices calibrated for critical care stood ready for deployment, yet using them required crossing professional boundaries. Each piece of equipment offered possibility while simultaneously highlighting risk. Emily's medical training emphasized the delicate balance required for successful intervention. Too much warmth too quickly could trigger fatal cardiac arrhythmias. Insufficient warming meant continued deterioration of vital organs. The cubs' small size made them especially vulnerable to temperature changes, while their mother's massive bulk complicated rewarming efforts. Through sophisticated medical technology, Emily observed new complications developing in their condition. The mother bear's blood chemistry showed dangerous imbalances, elevated potassium levels that threatened cardiac function, acidosis from prolonged oxygen deprivation, depleted glucose reserves, leaving no energy for recovery. Each abnormality required careful correction to prevent cascade failure. The treatment bay's emergency protocols activated in sequence as Emily grappled with her decision. Warming blankets designed for creatures weighing hundreds of pounds reached optimal temperatures. Intravenous fluids, heated with precise control, waited in specialized delivery systems. Emergency medications, calculated for critical situations, stood ready in their syringes. Emily's professional experience illuminated the complexity of timing in their situation. The cubs needed immediate intervention to have any chance of survival. Their small bodies already pushed far beyond normal limits. The mother bear's condition required equally urgent care, though her massive size meant any treatment carried additional risks. The sanctuary's emergency monitors flashed urgent warnings as Emily faced the moment of final decision. Her advanced medical displays showed multiple critical alerts: severe bradycardia in all four bears, dangerous hypotension, and core temperatures far below sustainable levels. The smallest cub's vital signs had nearly flatlined, its tiny body losing the battle against overwhelming cold. Sophisticated thermal imaging revealed the devastating progression of hypothermia throughout their bodies. The mother bear's natural defenses, evolved over millennia to withstand Arctic conditions, had been completely overwhelmed. Her massive form swayed precariously as her consciousness began to fade, though her eyes remained locked on Emily with surprising clarity. The treatment bay's environmental controls created sharp boundaries between life and death. Within the heated space, emergency equipment hummed at ready status. Beyond the open door, lethal cold continued its relentless assault. Emily's medical training told her these bears had minutes, not hours, before their condition became irreversible. Through state-of-the-art monitoring systems, Emily observed cascading organ failure beginning in the cubs. Their small bodies, pushed far beyond natural limits, showed signs of impending cardiovascular collapse. The largest cub managed weak, irregular breaths, while its siblings had nearly stopped breathing entirely. The mother bear's attempts to check on them grew increasingly uncoordinated. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical stores contained medications that could potentially save them, but administering treatment to conscious bears carried extreme risks. Emily's professional expertise highlighted the complexity of their situation. Standard protocols assumed working with sedated animals under controlled conditions. These bears needed immediate intervention while fully awake and potentially defensive. Emergency equipment surrounded Emily as she prepared to cross the point of no return. Specialized warming units designed for massive predators reached therapeutic temperatures. Intravenous fluid bags, heated to precise specifications, waited in their warming chambers. Critical care medications, calculated for extraordinary circumstances, stood ready in their syringes. The treatment bay's advanced life support systems engaged automatically as vital signs crossed critical thresholds. Warming panels designed for post-surgical recovery cast their gentle heat across the medical area. The temperature gradient between the heated space and the Arctic conditions outside created visible currents in the air, stirring loose medical supplies. Emily's medical training emphasized the razor's edge. They walked between survival and disaster. Too much intervention too quickly could send them into fatal shock. Too little meant certain death from hypothermia. The cubs' immature systems added another layer of complexity to an already unprecedented situation. Their mother's massive size meant any treatment carried its own unique risks. Through sophisticated diagnostic equipment, Emily tracked new complications developing in their condition. The mother bear's blood chemistry showed dangerous imbalances that threatened cardiac function. Her cubs displayed severe acidosis from prolonged oxygen deprivation. Each passing moment increased the risk of permanent organ damage or sudden cardiac arrest. The sanctuary's emergency protocols had never contemplated a scenario of this magnitude. Emily had designed the facility to handle serious wildlife emergencies, but always under controlled conditions with properly sedated animals. Treating 4 conscious, critically ill, bears simultaneously pushed beyond all established procedures and safety guidelines. Advanced monitoring systems streamed real-time data across Emily's medical tablets, each reading more dire than the last. Blood pressure. Values showed dangerous hypertension as their circulatory systems began to fail. Oxygen saturation levels plummeted while their bodies struggled to maintain basic functions. Cardiac monitors displayed increasingly concerning arrhythmias. The treatment bay's pharmaceutical inventory provided specialized medications rarely used in wildlife rehabilitation, vasodilators to improve circulation without overwhelming stressed hearts, thermoregulatory enhancers designed specifically for large predators, emergency cardiac medications calibrated for massive body weights. Each treatment option carried its own risks and potential complications. Through thermal imaging cameras, Emily observed the bear's heat signatures growing fainter with each passing moment. The mother bear's natural insulation, typically sufficient for extreme conditions, had been compromised by prolonged exposure. Her cubs, lacking fully developed fat reserves, showed dangerous signs of central nervous system depression. Emily's professional experience highlighted the unprecedented nature of their circumstance. Standard hypothermia protocols assume treating single animals under controlled conditions. Managing 4 critically ill bears simultaneously, each requiring immediate intervention, pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The mother bear's massive size alone presented unique challenges for treatment and monitoring. The sanctuary's advanced equipment hummed with potential energy as Emily finalized her approach. Specialized monitoring leads designed for large predators waited to be attached. Warming devices calibrated for critical care stood ready for deployment. Each piece of equipment represented a crucial element in the complex intervention required to save these magnificent creatures. Through sophisticated medical technology, Emily observed their neurological status deteriorating rapidly. The cubs displayed minimal response to stimuli, their bodies conserving energy by shutting down non-essential functions. The mother bear's consciousness wavered, though maternal instinct kept her focused on her offspring despite her own critical condition. The treatment bay's emergency generators strained under increasing power demands as Emily activated additional support systems. Warming units designed for massive predators reached therapeutic temperatures. The temperature differential between the heated space and the Arctic conditions outside created visible currents in the air. Emily's medical training illuminated the complexity of timing in their situation. The cubs needed immediate intervention to have any chance of survival, their small bodies already pushed far beyond normal limits. The mother bear's condition required equally urgent care, though her massive size meant any treatment carried additional risks. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical stores contain medications that could mean the difference between life and death. Cardiac stabilizers designed for massive predators, thermoregulatory enhancers calibrated for bears' unique metabolism, emergency stimulants that could help restart failing organs. Each medication required precise calculation based on weight and condition. Through advanced monitoring equipment, Emily tracked their deteriorating vital signs with growing urgency. Blood pressure readings showed dangerous hypertension, their circulatory systems beginning to collapse. Oxygen saturation levels dropped steadily as their bodies struggled to maintain basic functions. Cardiac monitors displayed increasingly concerning arrhythmias. The treatment bay's emergency protocols activated in sequence as Emily prepared for intervention. Warming blankets designed for creatures weighing hundreds of pounds reached optimal temperatures. Intravenous fluids, heated with precise control, waited in specialized delivery systems. Emergency medications, calculated for critical situations, stood ready in their syringes. Emily's professional expertise told her that conventional treatment approaches would not be sufficient. These bears needed immediate, aggressive intervention to have any chance of survival. The cubs, especially, required rapid core rewarming. Their small bodies had no more reserves to draw upon. The mother bear's massive size meant any intervention would need to be carefully balanced to prevent shock. The moment of truth arrived. As Emily Richardson stepped forward into the Arctic air, streaming through the open bay door, her breath crystallized instantly, forming delicate ice patterns that danced in the emergency lighting. The mother bear's eyes tracked her movement, showing a startling awareness despite her critical condition. Time seemed to pause as predator and healer assessed each other across the diminishing space between them. Specialized sensors embedded in Emily's protective gear transmitted her own vital signs to the sanctuary's monitoring system. Her heart rate elevated steadily as she moved closer to the bears, professional calm warring with instinctive caution. The reinforced medical kit in her hands contained equipment specifically designed for treating massive predators in emergency conditions. The treatment bay's advanced systems responded automatically to her approach. Warming panels adjusted their output to create optimal conditions for emergency care. The sophisticated ventilation system worked to maintain a delicate balance between the life-saving warmth inside and the lethal cold pouring through the open door. Every piece of technology in the sanctuary focused on supporting this critical intervention. Emily's movements remained slow and deliberate as she closed the distance. Her medical training emphasized the importance of projecting calm confidence when approaching injured wildlife. The mother bear watched her advance, massive head swaying with exhaustion but maintaining unwavering focus. The cubs lay motionless in the snow, their small forms barely visible beneath growing ice crystals. The sanctuary's emergency protocols activated in precise sequence as Emily reached the critical threshold. Warming units designed for treating large predators hummed at maximum capacity. Specialized monitoring equipment tracked vital signs from multiple sources simultaneously. The pharmaceutical deployment system stood ready to deliver precisely calculated medications at a moment's notice. Through sophisticated medical displays, Emily observed new complications developing in the bear's condition. The mother's cardiac rhythm showed dangerous irregularities that suggested imminent failure. The cubs' core temperatures had dropped so low they barely registered on standard equipment. Each passing second increased the risk of permanent damage to vital organs. The treatment bay's environmental controls created sharp boundaries between survival and death. Within the heated space, emergency equipment waited to deploy. Beyond the open door, Arctic wind carried ice crystals that could freeze exposed flesh in seconds. Emily's professional judgment told her these bears would never survive without immediate intervention. Advanced monitoring systems streamed real-time data as Emily made her final approach. The mother bear's massive form trembled with exhaustion, her fur encased in crackling ice. Her cubs showed no response to external stimuli, their small bodies beginning to shut down non-essential functions. Standard medical procedures offered no guidance for this extraordinary circumstance. Emily's medical expertise guided her movements as she prepared to initiate treatment. The warming blankets, designed for creatures weighing hundreds of pounds, needed precise placement to be effective. Emergency medications required careful administration to prevent shock. Each step carried both promise and peril as she worked to save these magnificent animals. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical inventory provided specialized medications rarely used in wildlife rehabilitation, vasodilators to improve circulation without overwhelming stressed hearts, thermoregulatory enhancers designed specifically for large predators, emergency cardiac medications calibrated for massive body weights. Each treatment option required perfect timing and execution. Through thermal imaging cameras, Emily tracked the progression of hypothermia throughout their bodies. The mother bear's natural defenses, evolved over millennia to withstand Arctic conditions, had been completely overwhelmed. Her cubs, lacking fully developed survival adaptations, showed increasing signs of systemic failure. Their thermal signatures grew fainter with each passing minute. The treatment bay's emergency generators hummed at maximum capacity as Emily positioned the first warming blanket. The specialized fabric, embedded with advanced heating elements, needed to cover vital organs without restricting breathing. The mother bear's eyes never left her as she worked, showing remarkable tolerance despite her natural instincts. Emily's professional training highlighted the complexity of their situation. The cubs required immediate core rewarming to have any chance of survival. Their mother's massive size meant any treatment carried additional risks of shock or adverse reactions. Success required perfect execution of procedures never before attempted under these conditions. The sanctuary's advanced monitoring equipment tracked vital signs from multiple sources as Emily began the delicate process of emergency care. Blood pressure readings showed dangerous hypertension as their circulatory systems struggled to maintain function. Oxygen saturation levels dropped steadily while their bodies fought to preserve vital organs. Cardiac monitors displayed increasingly concerning arrhythmias. Through sophisticated diagnostic equipment, Emily observed the bear's neurological status. Deteriorating rapidly, the cubs displayed minimal response to stimuli, their bodies conserving energy by shutting down non-essential functions. The mother bear's consciousness wavered, though maternal instinct kept her focused on her offspring, despite her own critical condition. The treatment bay's emergency protocols guided Emily's actions as she worked to save the bear family. Warming. Blankets designed for massive predators reached therapeutic temperatures. Intravenous fluids, heated with precise control, waited in specialized delivery systems. Emergency medications, calculated for critical situations, stood ready in their syringes. Emily's medical expertise told her that conventional treatment approaches would not be sufficient. These bears needed immediate, aggressive intervention to have any chance of survival. The cubs, especially, required rapid core rewarming. Their small bodies had no more reserves to draw upon. The mother bear's massive size meant any intervention would need to be carefully balanced to prevent shock. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical stores contained medications that could mean the difference between life and death. Cardiac stabilizers designed for massive predators, thermoregulatory enhancers calibrated for bears' unique metabolism, emergency stimulants that could help restart failing organs. Each medication required precise calculation based on weight and condition. Through advanced monitoring systems, Emily tracked the bear's vital signs as she initiated emergency care. Blood pressure readings showed dangerous hypertension, their circulatory systems beginning to collapse. Oxygen saturation levels dropped steadily as their bodies struggled to maintain basic functions. Cardiac monitors displayed increasingly concerning arrhythmias. The treatment bay's environmental controls struggled against Arctic conditions, still pouring through the open door. Emily had designed these systems for extreme situations, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this level of challenge. The temperature differential between the heated space and the outside air created visible currents that stirred the medical supplies. Emily's professional experience guided her hands as she worked to save the bear family. Each movement required imperfect precision as she administered emergency treatments. The mother bear's tolerance of her presence defied natural instincts, allowing intervention that could mean the difference between life and death for her cubs. The sanctuary's advanced equipment hummed with energy as Emily continued her desperate effort. Specialized monitoring leads provided real-time data about the bear's condition. Warming devices worked to combat the devastating effects of hypothermia. Each piece of technology represented hope in the face of seemingly impossible odds. Frost formed intricate patterns on Emily's protective gear as she worked against time to save the bear family. Her specialized medical equipment delivered real-time readings of their critical condition. The mother's heart rate had dropped to dangerous levels, while the cubs showed minimal signs of life. The smallest cub's vital signs flickered on the edge of existence, its tiny form nearly lost beneath accumulating snow. The treatment bay's sophisticated warming systems engaged at maximum capacity, creating an island of warmth in the Arctic. Maelstrom. Emily moved with practiced precision, positioning emergency equipment around the bears. The mother's massive form trembled with exhaustion, her fur crackling with ice, yet her eyes remained fixed on Emily with remarkable awareness. Advanced thermal imaging revealed the extent of hypothermia's progression through their bodies. Core. Temperatures had plummeted far below sustainable levels, threatening permanent damage to vital organs. Emily's hands moved steadily as she attached monitoring leads designed for large predators, each sensor providing crucial data about their deteriorating condition. The sanctuary's emergency protocols guided Emily's intervention as she began the delicate process of rewarming. Specialized heating blankets, calibrated for creatures weighing hundreds of pounds, needed precise placement to prevent thermal shock. The mother bear's tolerance of human contact defied natural instincts, allowing treatment that could mean the difference between survival and death. Through sophisticated medical displays, Emily tracked the bear's responses to initial treatment. The largest cub showed the first signs of improvement, its heart rate stabilizing slightly as warmth penetrated its small body. The middle cub's breathing remained shallow but steady, while the smallest one required immediate intensive care to have any chance of survival. Emily's professional expertise drove her actions as she administered emergency medications. Vasodilators, to improve circulation without overwhelming stressed hearts. Thermoregulatory enhancers designed specifically for large predators. Each injection required perfect timing and placement, the margin for error non-existent in their critical state. The treatment bay's environmental controls maintained optimal conditions as Emily worked to save the bear family. Warming panels adjusted automatically to create the perfect temperature gradient for recovery. The sophisticated ventilation system balanced the need for fresh air with the requirement to maintain life-saving heat. Advanced monitoring equipment streamed constant updates about the bear's condition. Blood pressure readings began to stabilize as circulation improved. Oxygen saturation levels rose gradually as their bodies responded to treatment. Cardiac monitors showed strengthening rhythms as their massive hearts fought to maintain vital functions. Emily's medical training highlighted the complexity of treating multiple critical patients simultaneously. Each bear required individualized care based on size and condition. The cubs needed rapid rewarming to prevent organ failure, while their mother's massive bulk demanded a more gradual approach to prevent shock. The sanctuary's pharmaceutical inventory provided crucial medications for their recovery. Cardiac stabilizers helped maintain proper heart function. Electrolyte solutions restored critical balance to their systems. Emergency stimulants supported vital organ function as their bodies fought to survive. Through sophisticated diagnostic equipment, Emily observed signs of improvement in their condition. The mother bear's blood chemistry showed gradual normalization as treatment took effect. The cubs' core temperatures rose slowly but steadily, their small bodies responding to the careful intervention. The treatment bay's emergency generators maintained constant power to essential systems as Emily continued her work. Specialized monitoring leads provided real-time data about their recovery. Warming devices operated at optimal levels to combat the devastating effects of hypothermia. Emily's professional experience guided her decisions as she adjusted treatment parameters. Each medication dosage required precise calculation based on weight and condition. The timing of interventions needed perfect coordination to maximize effectiveness while minimizing stress on their weakened systems. The sanctuary's advanced equipment supported Emily's efforts to save the bear family. Intravenous fluid warmers maintained exact temperatures for administration. Cardiac monitoring systems tracked every heartbeat, Environmental controls created perfect conditions for recovery. Through thermal imaging cameras, Emily tracked their gradual improvement. Heat signatures strengthened as circulation returned. To extremities, core temperatures rose steadily as their bodies responded to treatment. Each positive change represented a small victory in their fight for survival. The treatment-based sophisticated systems worked in harmony as Emily monitored their recovery. Warming blankets maintained therapeutic temperatures without causing thermal shock. Ventilation systems provided optimal air quality while preserving crucial heat. Emergency equipment stood ready for any complications. Emily's medical expertise allowed her to recognize subtle signs of improvement in their condition. The mother bear's breathing deepened and steadied as treatment took effect. The cubs showed increasing response to stimuli, their small bodies fighting back from the brink of death. The sanctuary's emergency protocols guided each step of their recovery process. Specialized monitoring equipment tracked vital signs from multiple sources. Pharmaceutical delivery systems provided precise medication doses. Environmental controls maintained perfect conditions for healing. Through advanced medical technology, Emily observed the gradual strengthening of their vital signs. Blood pressure. Readings stabilized within acceptable ranges. Oxygen saturation levels improved consistently. Cardiac function showed steady normalization as treatment continued. The treatment bay's emergency equipment maintained constant support as Emily worked to ensure their survival. Warming systems operated at optimal levels to maintain therapeutic temperatures. Monitoring leads provided crucial data about their condition. Life support systems stood ready for any complications. Emily's professional training allowed her to anticipate and prevent potential complications during their recovery. Each adjustment required careful consideration of their unique physiology. The timing of interventions needed perfect coordination to support their healing process. The sanctuary's sophisticated monitoring systems tracked every aspect of their improvement. Vital sign readings showed steady normalization as treatment continued. Blood chemistry values indicated proper response to medication. Tissue perfusion improved as circulation strengthened. Through advanced diagnostic equipment, Emily monitored the effectiveness of their treatment. Core temperatures rose gradually to sustainable levels. Organ function showed consistent improvement. Neurological responses strengthened as their bodies recovered from severe hypothermia. The treatment bay's environmental controls maintained perfect conditions for their continued recovery. Warming systems provided consistent therapeutic heat. Ventilation equipment ensured optimal air quality. Emergency generators maintained constant power to essential equipment. Emily's medical expertise guided the complex process of their rehabilitation. Each treatment decision required careful evaluation of their condition. The timing of interventions needed precise coordination to support their recovery while preventing complications. The sanctuary's advanced technology supported every aspect of their care. Monitoring systems provided constant updates about their condition. Pharmaceutical delivery devices ensured accurate medication administration. Environmental controls maintained optimal healing conditions. Through sophisticated medical displays, Emily tracked their steady progress toward recovery. Vital signs showed consistent improvement as treatment continued. Blood chemistry values normalized gradually. Tissue perfusion strengthened as circulation improved. The treatment bay's emergency systems maintained constant support as Emily worked to ensure their survival. Warming devices operated at therapeutic levels without causing stress. Monitoring equipment provided crucial data about their condition. Life support systems stood ready for any complications. Emily's professional experience allowed her to recognize and respond to subtle changes in their condition. Each treatment adjustment required careful consideration of their unique needs. The timing of interventions needed perfect coordination to support their healing process. The sanctuary's sophisticated equipment maintained optimal conditions for their recovery. Environmental controls provided perfect temperature regulation. Monitoring systems tracked vital signs continuously. Emergency generators ensured constant power to essential systems. Through advanced medical technology, Emily observed the gradual strengthening of their vital functions. Blood pressure readings stabilized within normal ranges. Oxygen saturation levels improved steadily. Cardiac function showed consistent normalization as treatment continued. Morning light filtered through the treatment bay windows, casting a golden glow across the remarkable scene within. The sophisticated medical equipment that had worked tirelessly through the night now displayed steady, strong, vital signs for all 4 bears. Emily Richardson stood at her monitoring station, watching as the mother bear gently nuzzled each of her cubs, their small bodies now warm and responsive. The sanctuary's advanced thermal imaging showed a complete transformation from the critical situation hours before. Healthy heat signatures radiated from all 4 bears, their core temperatures stabilized within normal ranges. The mother's massive form no longer trembled with exhaustion, and her eyes held a bright alertness that spoke of returning strength. Through specialized monitoring equipment, Emily tracked the final stages of their recovery. Blood chemistry values had normalized, showing proper organ function and metabolism. Cardiac readings displayed strong, regular rhythms that proved their hearts had survived the extreme stress. Each indicator confirmed what seemed impossible mere hours ago. All 4 bears would make a full recovery. The treatment bay's sophisticated systems maintained optimal conditions as Emily prepared for their release. Warming units had been gradually reduced as the bear's natural thermoregulation returned. Environmental controls created a perfect transition zone between the heated medical space and the outside world, where the storm had finally begun to subside. Emily's professional expertise recognized the subtle signs of their readiness to return to the wild. The cubs showed increasing activity, their natural curiosity returning as they explored their surroundings. The mother bear remained calm, but alert, her powerful body ready to guide her family back to their natural habitat. The sanctuary's emergency equipment powered down in careful sequence as Emily initiated release protocols. Monitoring leads detached automatically, allowing the bears complete freedom of movement. The sophisticated tracking systems would continue to monitor their vital signs remotely, ensuring their successful transition back to independence. Through advanced medical displays, Emily observed their final readings before release. The smallest, cub, whose life had hung by a thread, now showed strength equal to its siblings. The mother bear's vital signs reflected perfect health. Her massive body fully recovered from the devastating hypothermia that had nearly claimed their lives. The treatment bay's emergency doors opened slowly, revealing a transformed landscape outside. The brutal storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow that sparkled in the morning sun. The temperature had risen to sustainable levels, and the wind had calmed to a gentle breeze. Emily's medical training had prepared her for countless emergencies, but nothing could have prepared her for the moment of watching the bear family prepare to leave. The mother bear rose to her full height, her magnificent form silhouetted against the morning light. Her cubs gathered close, their movements strong and coordinated. The sanctuary's sophisticated monitoring systems captured every detail of their departure. The mother bear led her cubs with confident steps toward the open door, their bodies moving with the natural grace of healthy wild animals. Each step took them closer to freedom, their survival a testament to the power of compassion and medical expertise. Through thermal imaging cameras, Emily watched as they made their way into the fresh snow. Their heat signatures showed perfect regulation, proving their bodies had fully recovered the ability to maintain temperature in the winter environment. The cubs bounded through the drifts with renewed energy, while their mother moved with powerful dignity. The treatment bay's emergency systems remained on standby as the bears moved further from the sanctuary. Advanced tracking equipment monitored their progress, confirming their successful adaptation back to the natural environment. Each reading showed strong vital signs and proper body function. Emily's professional experience allowed her to appreciate the full magnitude of their recovery. The mother bear's decision to trust human intervention had defied natural instinct, creating a bridge between wild and human worlds. Her cubs had survived impossible odds, their small bodies fighting back from the brink of death. The sanctuaries. Advanced technology continued to track their movement into the forest. Sophisticated sensors monitored their progress from a distance, confirming their successful return to their natural habitat. The bear family moved with increasing confidence. Their ordeal transformed into a story of survival against impossible odds. Through specialized monitoring equipment, Emily observed their final transition to freedom. The mother bear paused at the forest's edge, her massive form commanding attention in the morning light. She turned to look back at the sanctuary, her gaze meeting Emily's one last time across the distance. The treatment bay's emergency protocols completed their final sequence as Emily watched the bear family disappear into the trees. The sophisticated systems that had helped save their lives powered down gradually, returning the sanctuary to its normal operational state. Each piece of equipment had played a crucial role in their miraculous survival. Emily's medical expertise had pushed the boundaries of wildlife rehabilitation, creating a precedent for handling extreme emergencies. The bear family's survival proved that compassion and professional skill could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Their story would serve as inspiration for future wildlife emergency responses. The sanctuary's advanced monitoring system captured the bears' last movements as they vanished into their natural habitat. Sophisticated tracking equipment would continue to monitor their progress from a distance, ensuring their successful reintegration into the wild. Each step took them further from the crisis that had brought them to the sanctuary's door. Through advanced medical technology, Emily confirmed their complete recovery one final time. Vital signs showed perfect health and strength as they returned to independence. Blood chemistry values reflected normal function across all parameters. Cardiac readings displayed strong, steady rhythms that would carry them forward into their renewed lives. The treatment bay's sophisticated equipment powered down completely as Emily completed her final documentation. The emergency systems that had worked tirelessly through the night returned to standby status, ready for the next wildlife crisis. Each piece of technology had contributed to a miracle of survival and healing. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.